Are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Are you good?
I don't know. I'm the only one here.
Okay.
They said they wanted to do a 1 through 11:30. So I don't know. Do I need to contact somebody, or is this, you know?
Well, let me try to remember who is Allison, the
Allison is the
speaker today.
Yeah, Allison is the speaker. Meredith Haynes is the one who set it up.
Right.
Oh, and I'm recording. Let me turn the recording off, or pause it rather. Allison, right now I'm showing 5 attendees on.
Okay. Got about 1 more minute and we'll go ahead and get started right on time.
Sounds good. I will go ahead and make the introductions, unless you would like to wait a few minutes.
I think we should go ahead and then go ahead and press record if you're recording today.
I am. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Linda Westrick, the Outreach Coordinator with Partners Resource Network. And we are the Parent Training and Information Center for the state of Texas. We are grant funded by the Department of Education, Office of Special Education in Washington, D.C. So we are completely free to parents of children with disabilities, youth self-advocates, and any interested parties that are involved in the special needs community. First of all, I want to go ahead and introduce Allison Schaberg. She's with Consolidated Planning Group, and she will be our speaker today. Also, I just want to bring up that we are having, if you are in Region 7 or 8 of the Educational Service Centers, we are having conferences coming up this month. They will be for parents, self-advocates, as well as professional organizations. It is also free. They are going to be at the Regional Education Service Center, so they are in person. If you're interested in learning more, my information for my email is in the chat box. We would like to make sure that if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box, and Allison will go ahead and answer those probably later, but possibly some in between. I think that's it, Allison.
Thanks so much. It's such a pleasure to be here with you today. As you said, for the housekeeping items, I always like to tell you, in case you're wondering, we can't see you or hear you, but we do know you're there. So if you do have questions, we do invite you to put those in the chat box. We hope to answer as many as we can. Again, Allison Schaberg, Consolidated Planning Group. We are a holistic special needs planning firm. If you have joined our webinars in the past, welcome back. We're glad you're here. If this is your first time, we are glad to meet you, and you're in the right place. So a little bit about me. I am a parent to 4. I have 2 kids that have transitioned into adulthood with disabilities. Consolidated Planning Group is a holistic special needs financial planning firm. So I guess you can say that I eat, sleep, and breathe this. This is what I do. But these webinars were born, and we actually do have a YouTube channel, Consolidated Planning Group. It's in the chat box. That is something that you can subscribe to for free, and all of our past webinars live out there on the YouTube channel, and those webinars are geared towards helping you plan, kind of get your ducks in a row as it relates to planning for your loved one with special needs. So today we're going to talk about the key steps and some things that you need to know, and we're going to kind of brush the surface on these steps and some of the things that you need to know. And the thing is as you may already know, and maybe one of the reasons you're here is you feel overwhelmed with the task of planning, and maybe you don't know where to start, or you've been hitting some brick walls and you're feeling a little frustrated. First of all, I just want to say you are not alone. You are in good company. But these webinars are designed to help you navigate some of those roadblocks. And each one of these topics that we're going to brush on today have a full webinar for that specific topic. So if you have deeper questions on any of the topics that we discuss out there today, just know that on our YouTube channel, we'll live a webinar specifically tailored to that specific topic, okay? So let's talk about how to get started with special needs planning. One of the things that we talk about is developing a letter of intent. A letter of intent, I like to refer to this as a family love letter. As parents, we know more about our kids than anybody will ever forget, right? So this is something that, you know, when it comes to our kids, we know all of their diagnosis history, the meds that they take, what makes them function well, what makes them melt down, who are their doctors, what schools have they attended, what county were they born in, all that type of information. As parents, we keep this in our head. We know this, you have it down, but you just know this like the back of your hand. If you go to a doctor's appointment, you can just spout this off like, you know, you've said it a million times, right? A letter of intent is something that if we were no longer here, are able to communicate our child's needs to somebody else, that they could pick up this document and have a little bit better understanding of your child's functionality and how to kind of step into those shoes. This letter of intent is something that we actually have a template for. It is kind of an emotional thing as you're completing it. It's 20 pages. But putting all of those details down on paper for someone else, and sometimes that someone else might even be our spouse. We have a lot of families that have a caregiver. One spouse stays at home, maybe as a caregiver, and they handle all of these things while the other spouse may be providing, you know, an income into the family. So this is an important document. We have our wills, we have our special needs trust, we have these other documents that are also important, but that letter of intent is also very, very important. So we suggest that you work with a special needs planner to help you formulate a plan. So there's a lot of confusion out there on the differences of what we do and say what a special needs or an estate planning attorney does. And our jobs are very different. Although we work collaboratively a lot, you know, with clients, we do different functions. So Consolidated Planning Group, as a holistic special needs planning firm, what we do, we figure out the funding for the special needs trust. So an attorney is going to, I always say they're the paper and we're the money, right? So an attorney is the legal documents, you got to have them. They may help you with guardianship. They may help with a special needs trust, other powers of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, supported decision-making agreement, to name a few, are the things the attorney does. But we're the funding. We're nationally certified as Social Security advisors. We're members of the Special Needs Planning Academy. We have specialized software that helps families determine how and when to pull the trigger on Social Security to maximize benefits for the whole family. We have software that helps families that come to us and says, you know, listen, my child has care needs for the rest of their life, not just mine, and I need to plan for that financially, but I don't even know what that number looks like. We're able to determine those numbers on what kind of funding needs to go into the trust for the future. So as you start to plan, and maybe, you know, this is the next step on your planning trail, not assuming that nobody's taken any steps. You know, planning is kind of over a lifetime, and we take steps along the way. You're going to want to gather all the necessary planning documents. These are going to be things like your statements, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, any information about insurance that you have through the employer or outside of employer. This could be disability insurance, life insurance, long-term care. If you have a will or other legal documents that you already have in place, copies of your Social Security statements and full earnings records. These are some of the necessary documents as we plan for our kids with disabilities. The thing is when it comes to planning, it's almost like a third bucket. If you're married, you know, we have retirement to think about. A retirement for a person that has a loved one that is never going to move out and grow up and move out, you know, and be independent, or maybe they'll have, you know, semi-independence. The retirement looks a little bit different, you know, as you know, it's not necessarily sailing off into the sunset and traveling abroad and all the things that you might have thought that you once may have done. But I think it's important for you to look at your vision of how you hope things will look for both you and your spouse and your special needs child. Because a lot of times as parents, what we do is we put all these kids first and we put ourselves on the back burner, and then our health declines as a result of it. So there has to be this delicate balance when we're planning long term, especially if we're, not running sprints, but the long term, the marathon. And just remember that we can spend 25 to 35 years in retirement. So we talk like it's almost like 3 retirements. We've got retirement for you and a spouse. And then if we have a child that has care needs the rest of their life, not just ours, it's like a third bucket. And so we help families plan for that and figure out where that funding is going to come from, and what kind of funding do they need, and how do we get there, okay? So we talked about a letter of intent, and we mentioned that we do have a letter of intent template. You can create your own on a Word document. Ours is a form fillable PDF. And, really, it's something that I do recommend that you do on a computer as opposed to a notebook or handwritten, because we do recommend that you, from time to time, update your letter of intent as things change, medical, any medical updates, as things change with your child. We suggest visiting it twice a year, maybe scheduling something on your calendar to just look at it. Are there any updates that are needed to the document, etc.? But this list here is just an example of some of the things that are on a letter of intent. And just remember, it's not a will. Some people say, well, I have a will. A will is going to kind of spell out where your belongings are going to go and things like that. Perhaps you have a trust and other things of that nature. But this is more of the 101 on your child. If you were incapacitated or no longer here on this earth, and someone else was stepping in as caregiver, this is the information that they're going to need to kind of get off on the right foot and have a successful journey in this transition, because it won't be pretty. It'll be hard. So this is just going to help this along the way. This is something that if you do, that we suggest that you do talk to a spouse about, that make sure that they know that this exists. If you have a successor guardian or a successor caregiver named for your child, we do also recommend that they know about this. You don't necessarily have to give them all the information, but at least they know if something happens to you, you can find my letter of intent at X spot. That would be something important. Some people don't want to share all the details in advance. Some people are personal about that. Okay, so how will your child's care be funded? There's a variety of sources on how our kids' care will be funded, but what we want to make sure of is that we preserve the eligibility for state and federally funded programs. So a lot of families, if they have kids over 18, they may be getting SSI and Medicaid. Sometimes if you hit the resource limits for SSI prior to the child turning 18, you might be getting SSI and Medicaid. So we have SSI and Medicaid. We have Social Security Disability and Medicare. And these are two programs that are two very, very different programs. And I'm going to kind of go a little bit deeper on those because there's a lot of confusion here. We talk about this all the time. And again, we have whole webinars on SSI and Medicaid and these types of programs. But SSI is for the disabled. It stands for Supplemental Security Income. It's for the disabled and indigent, okay? And in general, the resource limits are $2,000. So if your child is under age 18, they look at mom and dad's resources and income. You can have one house, you can have one car, and basically $2,000 in your name. And that ratchets up for married couples and other situations. But basically what they're looking at is $2,000 in a person's name. If they have under $2,000 and they are deemed disabled in the eyes of the Social Security, that's what they're looking for, okay? So a lot of families, and this might be you, maybe haven't qualified for SSI or Medicaid all these years. Their child is clearly disabled, but they haven't qualified simply because you make too much money or you have too many assets. And a lot of families do not know that you should reapply for SSI and Medicaid after your child has turned 18, not before, but after your child has turned 18. Because what happens when our children turn 18 is that those financial qualifications that I just mentioned are based off of the child's assets and income, not the parents. And this, even if you have guardianship of said child, is based off of the child's assets and income, not the parents. So even though your child may have not qualified all these years, and it clearly has a disability, they very well may qualify after they turn 18. So one thing is actually, we don't have a slide in this presentation for it. I want to mention to you, there is something called the Social Security Blue Book. You can Google that, okay? The Social Security Blue Book. And what the Social Security Blue Book is a medical impairment guide. So if you are thinking about applying for SSI and Medicaid, it is the Social Security Administration's medical impairment guide where you can look up your child or whatever human you're working with. If you have a family member, you can look up their disability in the medical impairment guide. If they have multiple disabilities, I suggest looking them all up. And what the Blue Book will tell you is what evidence is the Social Security Administration looking for to prove that your child is disabled, okay? So, and where they're going to seek this evidence is in the medical records of the said applicant, okay? So they're going to get the PCP records. If you have a history with a neurologist, oncologist, cardiologist, all the specialists, psychiatrists, psychologists, they're going to get their medical records to look for evidence of proof of disability. So I just wanted to mention that to you. Anybody can Google that and you can look it up, but make sure that you're looking in the right manual, okay? So there is a manual for children under age, 18, and for adults, 18 and older, okay? So SSI is typically $841 a month, and that is the full monthly payment for 2022. If your child is getting SSI, but they're not getting $841 a month, they're getting maybe like probably $561 a month, it's probably a pretty good indication that you need to submit a rent agreement to the Social Security Administration indicating that your child is paying rent. We have rent templates for that as well. You guys can, reach out to us for that. But the rent template, basically SSI is designed to pay for food and shelter. So if the child is not paying for food and shelter, the adult child is not paying for food and shelter, SSI has a 1/3 reduction. So if you're getting $561 a month, you can get that increased by submitting a rent agreement. And then when your child gets paid at the beginning of the month, you can just move the rent over to your account. What you choose to do with it is up to you. If you want to turn right around and put it in an ABLE account for them, you can. If you need it for those expenses of food and shelter, then that's okay too. But that is how you get the $841 a month as opposed to the $561. Okay, so all this time, I've been talking about SSI. SSI does not stand for Social Security. It's Supplemental Security Income. So some families will say, my child's getting Social Security, when in fact they're not getting Social Security, they're getting SSI, totally different programs. So the next program that I'm going to talk to you about is Social Security Disability, also known as Social Security, also known as Ssdi, Social Security Disability Income. So this is a totally different program, and this program is confusing to people because one could only assume that if our child is disabled, then maybe they would qualify for Social Security disability. It just makes sense, but that's not how it works. And that is why it's so confusing, or if you've been confused by these terms that everybody throws around. So SSI is for the indigent and the disabled. Okay, it's an entitlement program. Social Security disability and Medicare, you pay into the system. So when we work, we have working quarters with the Social Security Administration, and we pay in to the Social Security system. And as we pay in, we become insured. So that way, if we become disabled later, that they'll pay a disability benefit, or if we don't become disabled later, but later retire under the Social Security Administration, they pay our Social Security benefits. Once you qualify for Social Security disability, after 2 years, you're eligible for Medicare. So Medicaid comes with SSI. 24 months after qualifying for Social Security disability, you qualify for Medicare. Also, Medicare eligibility is typically at age 65 is when you qualify for Medicare A and B, okay? So with these programs, what happens when a person applies for SSI and Medicaid, they also apply for Ssdi and Medicare. And typically what happens, I just want to give you a heads up on this because this happens all the time. They usually get the denial letter from Social Security disability first, and they feel really upset about that. Like, how can they say that my child is not disabled? Are you kidding me? But the denial letter is accurate. And they're basically denying your kid because in this example, your child hasn't worked, they haven't paid in the system, they're not fully insured for Social Security disability, and that denial letter comes first. But the confusing thing is the letter from the Social Security Administration for Ssdi and the letter for SSI, they look similar fonts, all coming from the Social Security Administration. You have to look carefully if it's saying Social Security or if it's saying SSI, Supplemental Security Income. But what they don't tell you, so what I want to tell you is when you get that denial letter, do not freak out. It is okay. You should expect this letter if they haven't paid into the system. What they don't tell you in that letter, and they don't tell you when you apply, is that the SSI letter comes second, usually. So usually the SSI letter of approval is going to come weeks behind the Social Security disability denial letter. The one thing that you guys need to know for our kids that had a disability that started prior to age 22, they are eligible to be covered as a disabled adult child. They've called it DAC for 40 years. They changed the name to Childhood Disability Benefits under a parent's record. And how this matters, we're going to talk about it in a few minutes. We're going to talk about it a little bit more. But what they recognize is that our children may not work. And they're basically saying that if the child's disability started prior to age 22, that they can basically be on mom or dad's shirt tails as it relates to the work credits for Social Security disability. And what that means to you is that later, if one parent files for Social Security disability or Social Security retirement, that child will be entitled to benefits under a parent's record. So we are going to spend a little bit more time talking about that as well. But those are the two main things. And just wanted to, I know I've spent a lot of time on this, but there's the greatest confusion between these two programs and how they work and what to do and when. So we will talk more. So another way that a child's future care can be funded is have a special needs trust or an ABLE account. So a special needs trust and an ABLE account are two places that you can have money above and beyond the asset limit for Medicaid purposes that will not be counted against them. So a special needs trust, we're going to talk more about in a few minutes, can have an unlimited amount of money in it for the benefit of said child. And an ABLE account can have up to $100,000 before they disqualify for Medicaid, and the assets in the account are counted. So we will talk more about that. So we've got funding, and we all agree that nobody's getting rich off of $841 a month. Certainly that's not funding their future care. I mean, what is that going to pay for? But what a lot of families do, they have life insurance and other assets that are going to fund the special needs trust in the future. As it relates to funding a special needs trust, sometimes we get a question about should we fund it now or fund it later. We like the idea of funding a special needs trust with life insurance, leaving your other assets available to you and or you and your spouse during your lifetime for your retirement. Retirement for 25 to 35 years is a really, really long time. So we don't want to tie up our cash assets in a special needs trust that we can't get to for our own retirement benefits. We can have beneficiaries on cash assets to the special needs trust in the future, and we can have specific life insurance policies that are specifically earmarked to pay to a special needs trust. How are we on questions? Do we have any questions so far?
Not so far.
Okay, I actually see one. Okay, I see one in the Q&A. If a child has two households, is there a way to confirm if the other parent is getting SSI for the child? Currently not aware if the child has already been receiving this at the other household. So, yeah, that is. I mean, I think that you could check. I mean, there should be a Social Security account for said child. The other parent, if a child is receiving it and they are a minor, the other parent is the representative payee, which basically means if you call to find anything out, they're basically not going to tell you anything. That's a slippery slope. I mean, that may, involve a divorce attorney if there's joint custody or joint decision making or anything like that. But typically, and I just want to mention this, when this is important to know if you have an adult child as well. The Social Security Administration, although a power of attorney is a legal document and everything, they do not accept power of attorneys. They do accept guardianship. They do have a form that you can fill out. I believe it's online now for to be a representative payee, where a parent is actually paid the SSI benefits because the child does not have the wherewithal to handle money or the ability to make any kind of decisions like that. So there is something called becoming a representative payee. So let's talk a little bit further. So the representative payee can change, but if one parent has filed, I mean, it has to do with that. It has to do with the household and a lot of things, and it can be confusing. Now, one thing, just because
Allison,
you mentioned that.
I'm sorry. There is one more question there in the Q&A.
Okay, let's see. So we have my son already gets Ssdi because he works 7 years. My question is, can he get his father's disability amount even in the event of the father's passing? And honestly, that is going to depend on how much he has worked, and if he's worked, and earned more than the substantial gainful amount. Right now, the substantial gainful amount for 2022 is $1,350 gross per month. So if the child has earned more than the substantial gainful amount under his own work record, he's no longer considered for childhood disability benefits or disabled adult child under a parent's record. And furthermore, they're no longer considered for disabled adult child status or childhood disability benefits under a parent's record if they get married. So someone says, I'm sorry, still confused about SSI versus Ssdi. Once over the age of 18, disabled since birth, little work history, does the adult child, 29 years old, benefit more from SSI or Ssdi? That Typically, it's going to be SSI and Medicaid until the parent retires or goes on disability is typically how that's going to be. Because if they worked very little, they probably do not have enough work credits to qualify for Ssdi. If a parent has not retired themselves or is on disability themselves through the Social Security Administration, they cannot draw Social Security disability off of a parent's record in that regard. So it may be the SSI in this example and Medicaid. Once they're approved, let's talk about this a little bit further. So let's just say that your adult child is getting SSI and Medicaid. The parents have not retired. They're not disabled through the Social Security Administration. So you're clipping along and you're getting $841 a month in Medicaid. Then dad retires. So when dad retires, we're going to file for the childhood disability benefits under a parent's record. And over a period of time, they're going to switch him or her over to the childhood disability benefits under the parent's record, where the child is entitled to 50% of the parent's benefits. So if dad's benefit is $4,000 a month, excuse me, our disabled adult child is going to be getting $2,000. So they'll switch over from SSI to RSDI, SSDI, Social Security, Retirement Survivors Disability Income. And it's confusing because all of those terms are kind of synonymous, right? So they throw them all around. But basically, they switch over from SSI to SSDI. After 2 years, 24 months, they'll be eligible for Medicare. They will keep Medicaid because they qualified for Medicaid first under the Pickle Amendment. And basically, that's what's going to happen. There are cases where kids have worked. And in the case where we had in the chat question Q&A, where the child had worked 7 years. So depending on the child's age, is going to depend if the child is fully insured or not, because our work credits go up. The older we get, the more the work credits go up. To be fully insured is 40 credits. But when you have somebody in their early 20s, their credits might be 5 at first and then 10. And then by 30, it might be 15 credits. So you'll have to, kind of Google and see what the work credits are for your child, okay? Do we have an additional question?
Yes, we do. There's a couple.
I see a family limit also with family. Uh-oh, sorry about that.
There you go. Sorry.
So when we're looking at the family limit on the Social Security benefits, if the adult dies whose record the SSD is being considered under dies, how will that affect the surviving spouse? So if the parent's record, the parent dies that the record it is on, there are widower benefits for the surviving spouse. And that 50% benefit that goes to the disabled adult child will be increased to 75%. So the actual thing is we have a specialized software that plugs in all of this data and it spits it out. It takes into consideration the full earnings record of both parents. It takes into consideration the disabled adult child when you're pulling the trigger on Social Security. And it actually tells you how and when to pull the trigger on these benefits to maximize the benefits for the whole household. But someone mentioned the family maximum. There are family maximums. We actually have a slide on that. But our software will take into consideration those family maximums as well. So another person says, my daughter currently receives Social Security on her father's record. When I pass, can she collect on mine, and does she need to qualify? And the answer is when you go on Social Security disability or Social Security retirement or pass, your daughter can switch from her father's record to your record. So if a person retires first and they're covered by dad's record, and then later mom retires and mom's Social Security benefits are higher, it makes sense to move your kid from one parent's record to the other because it's going to increase their benefits. So that is a good question. Okay, So when should we think about applying for what, and what do you need to apply for? So unless you have less than $2,000 in your name, and if your child is under 18, if your child is under 18, unless you have less than $2,000, you can have one house or one car. We don't recommend you apply. You're going to get denied. It's based off of assets. It is based off of disability. And if you are over the asset amount, you are going to get denied. So applying for SSI the month that your child turns their 18th birthday, I suggest doing it, after their actual 18th birthday, so there's no confusion and they don't try to take a parent's financial information instead of the kid. Once the child has turned 18, it's based off of the child's assets, not yours. And so you need to be providing information of the child's assets. If you want to have evidence that demonstrates that the child's disability began prior to age 22 to qualify as formally called as the DAC, the Disabled Adult Child, and now they call Childhood Disability Benefits, or CDB. We recommend that you pull together medical history, the physician's name, address, phone number, diagnosis history, medications. And for the medications, they don't care about the milligrams, but they do want to know what they're for. I always say consider chatting with the PCP or the other doctors that they're going to send for records for, reviewing your records, because you've looked at the Social Security Blue Book. You know what the impairment guide says, that you need to show proof that what their inability to do is. Do the medical records spell that out? Is it clear what their disability is and what impediments that they have as a result of that disability? So I would take a look at that. And it might sound like kind of helicopter-like or whatever, but the thing is this process can be slow. Applying for SSI and Medicaid, you can fully expect for the application to take 3 to 6 months. There is a such thing as presumptive conditions where they have a compassionate allowance for. Presumptive conditions, compassionate allowance, cerebral palsy is one, Down syndrome is one. There's a whole bunch. In fact, they listed, this year, they added more than 200 conditions to the presumptive allowance. And basically what that means is that they're going to start paying you before your application is even approved, because they presume that the individual is disabled. They're still going to go through the approval process, but they're going to start paying you from the beginning if your loved one has a presumptive condition. ALS is an example, stroke is an example. There's a lot of presumptive conditions. So you can, again, you can Google that, and if anybody wants to put that in the chat box, it's presumptive conditions that the Social Security allows a compassionate allowance for. So you may just want to look at that. IDD, intellectual disability, IQ below 70 is in there as well. Okay, so benefits when a parent retires or becomes disabled or passes away. We've talked about this. So when a parent applies to receive their own Social Security benefits through retirement or disability, the Disabled Adult Child, or CDB, is entitled to receive half of the parent's benefit. This benefit also applies to minor children that are not disabled. So in the example of a marriage, you've married somebody that is older, they have minor children, dad retires, turns on his Social Security benefits, the minor children are going to get benefits whether they're disabled or not, okay? And those benefits will stop once they, I believe it's once they turn 16, they stop. But if the child is disabled, those benefits can continue. You just have to prove that the child is disabled, okay? So this is the 50% of the parent's record. When a parent passes away, those benefits are increased to 75% of the deceased parent's Social Security. So as somebody put in the chat box, be aware of family maximums. Our software will look at those family maximums. If a non-working spouse is also drawing from a spousal record, we see this all the time. Again, one family member is a caregiver, the other is the breadwinner, and the spouse draws from the caregiver spouse is going to draw from the breadwinner spouse. And so those are where those family maximums are going to come into play. Okay. It doesn't come into play when everybody has when both spouses work and have their own record. Okay. So all these little things that we've been throwing around, these little acronyms here: SSA, Social Security Retirement Benefits. RSDI is going to be the Retirement Survivors Disability Insurance. So this is like, you know, if a person passes away, if we've got benefits under a parent's record. We've got SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance. We got CDB, which is Childhood Disability Benefits, formerly called DAC, for Disabled Adult Child. I know it's all confusing, and it makes it even more confusing because sometimes when you call the Social Security Administration, they still throw terms around that they're not supposed to use anymore, because some of the workers have been there for many, many, many years, and they've used those terms for all those years, and so it's hard to get used to the new acronyms. DWB is Disabled Widowers Benefits, and an adult receiving Title II benefits is considered a beneficiary, okay? And you guys, I think I put this in the chat box, but you guys are going to get a copy of these slides because I know it is a lot to take in, and you will get a copy of these slides. So in our chat box, we had somebody that says that the person that had a kid that worked over 7 years never made over the limit. So when my husband retires, we should apply for my son to receive the father's disability amount. The answer is yes, but I suggest applying for SSI and Medicaid first. Hopefully he's already getting that. We want our kids to stay Medicaid qualified because all of the waivers are Medicaid waivers in the state of Texas. So in order to get a waiver, which we're going to talk about in a minute, you have to stay Medicaid qualified. So applying for SSI and Medicaid first, having that in place before the husband retires and we turn on childhood disability benefits, you want to do that because sometimes the parent's amount is so high, it could throw them over into not qualifying for Medicaid. If you're coming from SSI and Medicaid to SSDI, there is a such thing as a pickle amendment, so you will keep Medicaid. But if you didn't have Medicaid before, dad retires and you file for childhood disability benefits under a parent's record, and as a result of the income that the child is going to get as a result of dad's record, he makes too much and doesn't qualify for Medicaid, there's not a whole lot you can do. So that's the reason for that. Can a youth apply for Social Security and apply since a child and Social Security will reimburse all? No. Social Security is a system. So I'm going to repeat this, and I know it's confusing. Social Security and SSDI is a system that that parents, adults, workers pay into. Your child, your minor child, is not insured under the that Social Security system. So we wouldn't be applying for Social Security or Social Security disability for a minor child that has never worked. Okay, that you might be thinking about the SSI program, but again, the SSI program is for the disabled and the indigent. So if the child, if the child is a minor, they're looking at the parent's income, no more, their assets, no more than $2,000, no more than one house or one car. If you have more than one house or one car, then there's no need or more than $2,000, there's no need to apply for SSI and Medicaid until after the child turns 18, when they're going to start looking at the child's assets. So when we talk about having assets in the right buckets, we want to make sure that you have your assets in the right buckets and your child's assets in the right buckets. That is one of the first steps. And one of the things that you can do for that is ensure that your special needs family member's name is not set up as a beneficiary on any life insurance, investment, or bank accounts. I'm going to repeat it. Ensure that your special needs family member's name is not set up as a beneficiary on any life insurance, investment, or bank accounts, okay? I cannot stress this enough. I think I say this almost every webinar. If we're going to use Johnny Smith as an example, just fictional Johnny Smith. If Johnny Smith is disabled and he is your son, we don't want to name Johnny Smith directly, because if we name him as a beneficiary on a life insurance contract and something happens to you, they're going to pay him. And he's going to have more than $2,000, and he's going to disqualify for SSI and Medicaid, okay? Same thing. So what a lot of people do, and if you've done this, It's okay. You can fix it, and you can fix it for free. You just need a change of beneficiary form. We don't want to name these kids directly and outright. The right way to name these kids is for through a third-party special needs trust for the benefit of Johnny Smith, not Johnny Smith directly. Having the money to go to his special needs trust as opposed to Johnny directly prevents that money being counted against him. So some people say, well, you know, my parents left my son money and I didn't know, but they left it to him directly. Can I just not take it and then they won't count it? The answer is no. If they like inherited money, then it's as good as received, right? And so in order to fix that situation of somebody accidentally leaving your disabled child money in their name, you would have to hire an attorney at that point, and they'll need to get a court order to have that directed to a first party special needs trust. So so again, a first party special needs trust of what will be needed there. A first party special needs trust has a Medicaid payback on it. So if you do your planning the right way, you've got your third party special needs trust set up. The money is left to a third party special needs trust. There is no Medicaid payback on that. Some attorneys call the first party special needs trust the oops trust. Oops, somebody left me my child money that they shouldn't have, and now I have to get an attorney and have it moved to a first party special needs trust with a Medicaid payback because I didn't know. Okay, so having said this, you want to ensure well-meaning family members like grandma and grandpa or any wealthy family members don't leave assets to the named individual as opposed to a third-party special needs trust. Guys, we have entire webinars on these special needs trust, questions, first party, third party, all the details that you need to know in Texas. But one thing that I need to mention to you, because this is a total thing in Texas, and I think we've had some people on here that kind of mentioned maybe a separation or a divorce situation. In Texas, oftentimes child support continues post age 18 for the disabled. Okay, not always, but a lot of times it continues post age 18. Well, the Social Security Administration is going to count that child support as income. So once your child turns 18 and you think, hey, finally, I'm going to apply for SSI and Medicaid for my child and he's going to qualify. If you have child support that is continuing post age 18, the Social Security Administration counts that as income against your child. And so one of the ways that you can fix that is hire an attorney and have that child support redirected to a first party special needs trust. It's the child's money, first party special needs trust. If the child support goes to a first party special needs trust, it will not be counted against them for the means-based test for SSI and Medicaid. If child support continues post age 18 and it does not go to a special needs trust, you're going to have a hard time qualifying for SSI and Medicaid. You may not qualify at all. So it's really, really important that you have those conversations.
Allison?
Sure. You got a
Sorry to
question?
interrupt, but you, one thing, we've got about 15 more minutes. And then also there's
Sure.
another question in the Q&A.
Yes. Okay. In the example of two households, could my child's benefits run out since there's no way of knowing if they're receiving due to their disability? That, there is really, it's not going to necessarily run out. I mean, if the child is getting SSI, they're getting SSI. I mean, as long as they stay under the Medicaid guidelines and they remain disabled, they'll continue to get those benefits. If the other parent is disabled and the child's receiving benefits under the parent's record, the child will continue to receive those benefits until, basically adulthood in the eyes of the Social Security Administration, at which time the disabled child would need to prove their disability to continue the parent's benefits. There are specialists that you can get involved as it relates to this, but short of the other parent, talking about whether or not they're getting that, I highly doubt. The only thing that you could do is you could try to apply for the SSI and Medicaid. If you think that the child qualifies, you can try to apply, and if they're already getting benefits, then it'll be denied because they're already getting benefits, or they probably won't accept the application. Okay, so we have talked about the special needs trust. But let's talk about when do you need, so when do you need a special needs trust, and what about guardianship? So again, the special needs trust is going to preserve future benefit eligibility while providing resources for your special needs child. Because again, you can have an unlimited amount of money in a special needs trust for their future care. First party is their money. This could be from earnings that they have. This could be from a settlement. This could be gifts at Christmas. It could be anything. It could be child support on first party money. Third party money is money that we leave to them properly set up to the third party special needs trust. So guardianship, we have entire webinars on this. Guardianship can be applied for 6 months prior. You can start the process 6 months prior to the child turning 18. Guardianship is not for everyone. There are less restrictive options in Texas. A full guardianship is going to take away their right to vote, a right to marry, a right to drive. Partial guardianship will, leave some of those rights, that then can, cover other rights like, where they're going to live, et cetera. So there's guardianship, there's full guardianship, there's partial guardianship. And then of course, in Texas, we have a supported decision-making agreement that usually goes alongside a power of attorney and a healthcare power of attorney. So these are all options. And what I just want to say here is you don't have to know what you want or need. The attorneys that we refer to, this is what they do. This is what they eat, sleep, and breathe. They're going to talk to you about your options. They're going to learn more about your child and kind of talk through what might be the most appropriate. In Texas, the law states it has to be the least restrictive and most appropriate. They say for the ward, like ward, whatever. It's a horrible name, but it's what they use. So least restrictive and most appropriate. Now, some attorneys would say that, a power of attorney. So we've seen where families have had a power of attorney and a healthcare power of attorney and a supported decision-making agreement signed by their adult child, their 18-year-old. But if the 18-year-old does not have the capacity to understand what they're signing, that document can be rendered void and not taken. We've seen hospitals not take them. So in general, if your child has an intellectual disability with an IQ below 70, careful consideration in all of these matters is really, really important. So we say work with a qualified attorney to prepare these documents. This is not a do-it-yourself project. This is not hire your neighbor, the real estate attorney, because he's going to give you a discount. There are attorneys all across the state of Texas that really specialize in special needs. Your situation is specialized. You want to work with a specialist. A generalist will not do. You'll end up having to redo your documents and paying double the price anyway. But they will walk you through all this. So if you feel nervous about this or you feel like you don't know, it's okay. You don't have to know everything. They're going to walk you through this and talk through it. We've seen some families that they have kids that may or may not need a partial guardianship, where they might go down the highway of a healthcare power of attorney and supported decision-making agreement at first, knowing that they could, reach out for a more restrictive option in the future should that not be a good fit, right? So start out with the least restrictive. If we prove that that's not working, then we can back up and punt from there. Did you have a question?
No, I don't. Here's one.
Okay. Okay. If receiving Ssdi from an earlier age, father was retired and disabled child collected Ssdi under his Social Security record, how does one know if now the adult child has remained on Medicaid under the Pickle Amendment? If they were getting SSI and Medicaid first, then the Social Security Administration is supposed to notify Health and Human Services, and it should continue. Sometimes it does have to be reapplied for. Sometimes there's snafus in the system. But you should have a Medicaid card if they're covered under Medicaid. You can start by calling the Social Security Administration to see if they have their child listed as qualified for Medicaid. If the child is not showing as qualified for Medicaid and was getting SSI and Medicaid prior to the father retiring, then you need to ask about the pickle amendment and find out why this wasn't handled appropriately and ask them to fix it, is basically how that would work. So ABLE accounts. We talked about an ABLE account. This is organized under the tax code 529A for achieving a better life for an individual with a disability. So to qualify for an ABLE account, we actually open ABLE accounts for folks. The disabled individual's disability had to start prior to age 26. Doesn't matter how old they are now when they open the ABLE account, but the disability did need to start prior to age 26. It's limited to gift tax annual exclusion, which is currently $16,000 total annually for 2022. It is suggested, it has not been announced, it's suggested that that's going up to $17,000 for 2023, but it hasn't been formally announced yet. So you could put up to $16,000 a year into the ABLE account. If the individual with the disability is working, they can also have put an additional $12,880 into that account. So again, if they're working, we don't ever want their money to be over $2,000 in their bank account. So you can make a contribution to an ABLE account. This is a totally legal move. You can totally do this. The money can, be in the ABLE account. You can put it in the special needs trust. The cool thing about the ABLE accounts is if it can be construed as achieving a better life for an individual with a disability, you can pay for it out of an ABLE account. The accounts grow tax-free as long as it's a qualified distribution. The thing you need to know about the ABLE account is the states they might be able to claim a reimbursement paid by Medicaid. So there is a Medicaid payback on an ABLE account. Some people ask, why should I have an ABLE account and a special needs trust? What's the differences, and do I need both? Those are, valid questions. So basically, an ABLE account, when you're rent, basically food and shelter. So SSI is designed for food and shelter. And so you can actually pay for food and shelter out of an ABLE account without a 1/3 reduction to SSI. So you can pay for food and shelter without a 1/3 reduction to SSI. But again, if it can be construed as achieving a better life for an individual with a disability, you can pay for it out of an ABLE account. This is just a short list, but you can surmise all of the things that could be construed as achieving a better life for an individual with a disability. So here is an example of some things that a special needs trust can pay for. So, and it looks like it's a lot longer list. It's just the way that the slide is. So, but the bottom line is when it comes to a special needs trust cannot pay for rent or mortgage payments, basically food and shelter, without a 1/3 reduction to the SSI. So it can pay for it, but there will be a 1/3 reduction to the SSI if a special needs trust pays for it. That's why a lot of families have the special needs trust set up as well as the ABLE account. So if you have more questions on that, again, we have entire presentations on ABLE accounts, entire presentations on SSI, entire presentations on letters of intent, some of these things guardianship, these things that we've been talking about. So if you have further questions on that, you can go to our YouTube page and you can listen to that at your leisure. So what comes up is, who is going to care for our kids when we're gone? So we help you develop a future care plan. Those future care cost estimates, how much do I need to set aside for my child when I'm gone? We can help you with those exact numbers. And we like to say small, medium, and large. We have some families that want to plan for the worst, hope for the best. Maybe their child's going to need some care. Maybe they're going to need some attendant services, etc. So we can help you develop that plan. Consider touring facilities such as Brookwood, Barbridge Foundation, Daymark Living, just to name a few. They don't work for us. We don't work for them. There are many options in our state. And I would like to bring up at the October 26th, we have a residential panel. It's our second one that we've done that is going to talk about some of the residential options for semi-independent living, residential options, all kinds of stuff all throughout the state. So that's October 26th. We do suggest that you make careful considerations prior to naming any sibling as a future caregiver. having a solid plan, this kind of falls to the siblings if there's not a solid plan. So we just want to make sure that people think that's all the way through if the siblings have the capacity to do that at that time. So wait list, what is a local intellectual disability authority, LIDA, depending on who you talk to and how they say it. But there are waivers in the state of Texas, MDCP, class, DBMD, HCS, Texas Home Living Community First Choice. This link right here is going to take you to a place where you put your zip code in. It's going to tell you who your local designed to waive off some of the cost of care for an individual with a disability to keep them in home and community-based services. They may pay attendant hours, respite hours, therapy, all kinds of stuff. And this is the 800 number for the following waivers up here. And then we've got the number for the Star Plus. I'm not going to go into detail on all of these waivers. We do have a waiver webinar for this, but this is kind of just a breakdown of each of the waivers that are available in the state of Texas. So you can kind of look through those when you get those slides. Educational options post-high school for kids with disabilities. There are all kinds of programs all throughout the state, all throughout the country for our kids with disabilities, including intellectual disabilities. So look at these programs, look at them early. Sometimes they don't have as many seats. They don't have very many seats. So, plan early, look at those programs early and see if that is something that you would be interested in. Also, thinking about, post-high school, what does that look like? Is that age 18? Is that 21, 22? Will your child stay in the public school system extended post-age 18? So all of those things are things to keep on your radar. So we talked about a lot of things. This is kind of a summary of some of the things that we have discussed. We do have webinar topics on each and every one of these topics. And I know that when we have, multiple people on a webinar, we have personal situations that A, you may not want to put in the chat box, or B, it's just too convoluted to, during a webinar. But we certainly want you to reach out. We always offer free consultations to learn a little bit more about you, your situation, kind of your journey, and the planning that you've done so far, so we can gain a better understanding of how we might be able to help you going forward. We always, want you to meet our team. We work on a collaborative team at Consolidated Planning Group, so we like people to have some faces and names out there. And in our slides that you're going to get a copy of today, you can take a picture of this QR code, and it'll take you to a link where you can schedule your free consultation. It'll be by Zoom, where we'll talk to you a little bit further about your unique situation. So we've mentioned our Facebook page, maybe briefly our YouTube channel. When we put out that email later with a copy of today's recording as well as the slides, there'll be links for those channels and web pages, so you can like and follow those as well. I have got time, so if we're pretty close to our 1 o'clock hour. Does anybody have any additional questions that we weren't able to answer yet?
I don't see anything right now.
Okay. Well, it's certainly been my pleasure partnering with you guys today, and thank you for spending your lunch hour with us. A lot of information. You don't have to absorb everything that we just said, but knowing that there is help out there for you. We are nuanced in this. This is exactly what we do. And we can definitely help you on your journey. And if you walk away from this and at least just feel encouraged that there is resources out there and you can do this, we certainly hope you feel that way. So thanks so much, everyone, for taking your time to be with us today.
Also, I have launched a poll. This is information that we need at Partners Resource to show to determine how everything is working. It's an evaluation. It helps us keep our grant. Please fill that out. I will end the poll in a couple of minutes. Allison, thank you so very much. I really appreciate it. It was very informative today. And unless you have something
Thank you.
else,
Nope, that's all I've got. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
thank you. I will leave the poll open for just a couple of more minutes and then I will end it. And thank you very much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Bye now.
Bye-bye.